We will read from Tests from Volume 2, Part 5, from the Inner Light, item 41, starting from Not Mati in Netzach. And before that, we'll read from Tests, item 43, in the words of the Ari, item 43. After that, it returns to being not mati, not expanding in Keter. And then it is mati, expanding in Chokhmah. It's also expanding in Bina because of the chesed there, because he desires mercy. At that time, it is also mati in chesed. For then chesed descends to his place. And then it is not mati in gvura, because gvura ascends with chesed. At that time, it is mati in tiferet, and light descends in tiferet. Then it is not mati in netzach, since the light of netzach ascends with tiferet. At that time, it is mati in hod, since then the vessel of netzach turns its anterior and gives the three lights to hod, at which time hod turns its anterior to yesod and shines in it. Now let us learn. Not expanding in Netzach. Why not expanding in Netzach? Since the light of Netzach ascends with Tiferet. This too is for the above reason, that the light of Netzach is the vak of the toch of Zaranpin. It is only the posterior. And when does it rise in name? When the light of its interior is not in the degree, already in its Tiferet. Thus, when the interior of Tiferet returns to its place, it pulls its vak to it, the Netzach. Therefore, as Chesed pulled the light of Gvura, and as Chokhmah pulled herself the zone of Binah. Here too I want to show you that he divides zone of Binah and zone of Chokhmah also into Gar and Vak. When does he say zone of Binah rises in name? When there is not expanding in Chokhmah. At the time that there is expanding in Chokhmah, then they come out as one, they dwell as one. Then it rises specifically to Chokhmah and it does not rise in name. And we learned for the sake of the children, and here we learn differently. And there we learn differently, what does Binah need? Chesed. So it desires chesed, and for the sake of what does it change? It's all for the sake of the children. And here it is the opposite, because of its own phase, Gal and Vak. This is a bit of a contradiction. We'll see afterwards. We'll clarify this. Expanding in Hod. Since then, the vessel of Netzach turns its interior. He explains, after the light of Netzach, which is the Vak, rose, the Vak of Toch of Zaranpin, rose to the interior of the vessels of Tiferet, which is the Gar of the Toch of Zaranpin. It thus turns Netzach, the interior of its vessels, which was previously Chasadim, to its posterior. This is because the previous bestowal of Gal that was detained in it in the phase of posterior, that there was no Chokhmah, now when it began to Tiferet, has been inverted now and become the place of bestowal, as the interior of the vessel of Chesed that now controls it over Gvura. And furthermore, it gives its residue to Netzach, and in bestowing Gal to the Hod. Now we have found a way to understand the Sefirah of Hod, of Zaranpin, from its origin. Know that this Sefirah is the axis that all the corrections depend on and revolve around. Its vessel, the vessel of Hod, is the last fifth of the 5 phases of Kachab, Zeranpin, and Malchut, meaning the original vessel of Malchut. This is because the 4 previous Chasadim before Hod correspond to Kachab, Zeranpin as incorporation, and Chesed, the 5th, meaning the Hod, which is opposite Malchut. You already know that all those vessels of the second expansion, once again, are the vessels of the first expansion that have been emptied of their lights and passed to Parzuf Ab. It turns out that the vessel of Hod is phase 4 of the first expansion that has been emptied of her lights and did not leave any record after her. As above, the last phase is lost. As above. As it is written in the Ari's words. However, the light of Hod is not the light of Malchut, but the light of Zeranpin. What is this? The light of Hod is not the light of Malchut. If we say Hod is called the vessel of Malchut, but the light of Zeranpin, meaning what reached her from the residue of Netzach, when he was connected with the light of illumination of the Gar of Tiferet. Moreover, Hod, is the most important light among the Sefirot of Netzach Hod Yesod Malchut. From the perspective of the lights, it is phase of Gar of Zeranpin, Chokhmah. Not Zeranpin himself, Chasadim. Thus, he is more important than Netzach. What is Netzach? As Netzach is from the posterior and Vak of the light Tiferet. It turns out that when Netzach shines, there's only the light of Chasadim. But Hod is from the illumination of the interior of Tiferet, and Netzach connected to the interior of Tiferet, and from this light came to Hod. For he has illumination of Gal from Tiferet. This is why Hod is called the 5th Chesed, since he is the illumination of Gal that there is in Netzach Hod Yesod Malchut. Although it is for from the perspective of the vessel, which is the greater judgment in the 10 Sefirot, its core is the light in it, reforms him, of course. And its light of the vessel of Hod is now very sweetened, meaning from the illumination of Gal in Tiferet. And examine this carefully. What's written here? Here he explains to us that the light in Hod is the light of Chokhmah. And the light that was shining in Netzach was the light of Chasadim. That is, when Tiferet had only Chasadim, then Netzach was shining. When Tiferet had Chokhmah, then Netzach connected to Tiferet. And Hod received from Netzach what it has from Tiferet, the quality of Gal. It turns out that when I say Netzach, it has only Vak. When I say expanding in Hod, it already has Gal. It turns out also that when I say Hod is the 5th vessel, it is nevertheless still called the 5th Chesed. That is, because it has the light of Chasadim in illumination of Chokhmah. What derives from this, we will see afterwards. Here he explains to us what is the Sefirah of Hod. From its source, it is Malchut. Which Malchut? Of Zeranpin. Don't forget, Hod is Malchut. Not Malchut, Hod is the Sefirah of Zeranpin. Zeranpin has up to Yesod. Don't forget. We only say that Hod is called incorporation in Malchut, what is in Zeranpin. It also has Yesod. We'll speak about this afterwards. And he tells us thus, although from the perspective of the vessel it is incorporated from Malchut, so one should say it is called the quality of judgment, but it does not have the light of Malchut, it has the light of Zeranpin. And which light of Zeranpin does it have? Even more important than Netzach. Netzach shines only Chasadim. When it does not have Tiferet, only Chasadim, then Netzach rises in name. When does Hod rise in name? After Chokhmah is in Tiferet, then Netzach is nullified toward the Gal of Tiferet, toward Chokhmah. And then Hod receives. What is the remainder from Netzach? From what it now receives from the Gal, from the Chokhmah of Tiferet. It turns out that the vessel of Hod, he says, is more important than Netzach in this regard. When there was expanding in Netzach, there was only Vak. Now I say expanding in Hod, this is Gal. Which Gal? The light of Chasadim and illumination of Chokhmah. Since Hod is the quality of the interior of the Sof of Zeranpin. We learned earlier, there's Rosh. So we'll stop here and begin.
So we'll start from Hod turns its interior to Yesod and shines in it. You already know that all this light is the extended and expanding and not expanding from Binah on phase 1 in the vessel of Binah. To Hod is the light of Chasadim. In other words, it is the level that emerged on the coarseness of phase 1 that remained after the refinement of Binah, which is phase 2. The whole matter of the difference of expanding and not expanding, this does not pertain to the level at the level of Zeranpin. Rather, it is one level, coarseness of phase 1. If so, what makes the change there, expanding and not expanding, is primarily through the changes of the illumination of Gar and Chasadim. The illumination of Chokhmah shines Chasadim, or Chasadim without the illumination of Gar, without Chokhmah. However, there was no difference between them in the height or of the level, since they are all at the level of phase 1. For example, if we say not expanding in Keter, then phase 4/3 in Keter was refined to phase 3/2. If we say not expanding in Chokhmah, the phase 3/2 of the vessel of Chokhmah was refined. But when we say expanding and not expanding in Zeranpin, this is one quality. One cannot say it was refined from phase 1. Rather, what do we say? That expanding and not expanding, who is the cause of this? The matter of the light shines in Gal in the degree. That is Chokhmah called expanding and not expanding. That Chokhmah does not shine in the degree. However, not in the height of the level. This is what he says. Since there are the level phase 1, here the Sefirah Hod turned its interior backward. So he explains, although he had not completed the refinement of phase 1, but only canceled the phase of the illumination of Gar in it, which is the anterior, and turned the posterior into the phase of interior. This is already called not expanding in Hod and expanding in Yesod. However, here we must know we should not think that in Hod and Yesod there is a change of phase 1 or not. In truth, he says afterwards, he explains it differently. We'll see in a minute. That is, the light of Malchut and the vessel of Yesod. In Yesod, there's no longer coarseness of phase 1. Coarseness of phase 1 was refined in the Sefirot of Hod. And from Hod to Yesod, there was no refinement from coarseness to phase 1 to coarseness of root. Since we learn that Yesod of Ab is a narrow and long, it has no chasadim, what there are already no longer